today I'm showing you how to sew shirring or elastic smock. If you want to check out my sewing patterns, have a look at my website, studiocarolinashearer.com. I'm going to link it down below as well. And if you want to connect with me on Instagram, you'll find me at studiocarolinashearer, so same name as here. So for the supplies, you're going to be needing fabric, and shirring works best on light to medium weight fabric. You're also going to be needing narrow elastic thread. This is the one that I use in the video, and it's really nothing fancy. You can find it in most sewing stores. You're also going to be needing regular non-elastic sewing thread, and for the purpose of this video I am using contrasting colors. Then you'll need a fabric marker. I am using a friction pen, which is a heat erasable marker, so it disappears when I iron on it. And you're also going to be needing a ruler. All of the supplies that I use in this video are linked down below in the description. So to start off, I'm going to draw my seam lines on my fabric. I usually space my shirring lines 1 centimeter in between, and the more lines you have, the more elastic thread you're going to be using, which means the more elastic you're going to have in your fabric. So if you want the full effect of the shirring, you're going to need a couple of seam lines. And this is what it looks like when my lines are done. Now I will take my bobbin and I will hand wind the elastic thread around the bobbin. When I do this, I want to be careful to not pull it too much, because then it's going to be too much tension in the thread and it won't have the same effect. This is also why you hand wind the bobbin instead of using the bobbin winder on the machine, because that pulls the thread too much, it creates too much tension in the thread and you will lose that elastic effect. You also don't want to fill your bobbin completely, because then it's going to have difficulty turning in your bobbin case. So this is what your bobbin should look like when it's done. Now just insert that bobbin as you normally would and make sure that it feeds properly. Now I'll thread my upper thread with regular non-elastic sewing thread. And I will pull my under thread up as I normally would. So now I have non-elastic sewing thread for my upper thread and elastic sewing thread for my under thread. For my settings, I am using a regular straight stitch, and I'm going to turn my stitch length up to max or almost max. 4 is good for me. Of course, settings differ between machines, so I always do a little test piece before for the best results. And then I'm going to start to sew on my first line, and I'm going to start with doing a back stitch to lock my elastic thread in place. Then I'll sew along that full line, and when I get to the end of the line, I will go off my fabric. So needle will go off the fabric. I will lift my presser foot and pivot my fabric around and place it on the second line and just start sewing straight away. No back stitch. And again, when I get to the end of the line, I'll go off my fabric, lift my presser foot, pivot around, and continue on my next line. Do the same thing on all of your seam lines. And you can see with the more lines, the more elastic the fabric is getting. And when I get to the end of my last line, I will do a back stitch again to lock the elastic in place. And since I have locked the elastic, I can now cut my threads off. Alright, so this is what it looks like when it's done. I have my black non-elastic thread on the outside, and on the inside I have that white elastic thread. So for the best results, I will steam my fabric. So I'll just turn the steam to max on my iron and hover it over my fabric. This will make the fabric within my shirring a little bit more even. And since I use a heat sensitive marker, it will also erase my marker lines. But be careful not to iron straight on your fabric, because that might melt your elastic because it is plastic. So if you're too close, or if you iron on your fabric, you're going to ruin your shirring. So just hover over. All right, there we go. That's what it looks like. This is such a good, versatile sewing technique. It makes any fitted garment so much more comfortable, and it is surprisingly easy to do. If you're struggling with your shirring, a couple of things to check is how tight have you wound the elastic around your bobbin. If it's too tight, it's not going to work. Depending on your machine, you also might need to change the tension of your thread. And lastly, the stitch length. 4 is good for me on my machine, but that might not be good for you on your machine. So play around with it and see what works best for you. Thank you so much for watching, and if you found this helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps me out, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!